So hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is a review video. I used to make some music videos about my models, and also the review mostly about the die cast and the easy stuff that I can find around, and make a little comment of what it is in my opinion, my idea of the model. Instead, it's a video. This one is a video about one of my productions. I have a resin production of cars, planes, and trucks, and tanks, and details. Mostly focused on keep on the market something that did not exist, or if it exists, became so rare that I wanted to improve it and make it like my own version. Very rarely this happens because I prefer to make my own stuff. And this model I'm going to comment now was indeed one of my production. It was the FIAT G-91T, the trainer version of the Aeronautica Militare Italiana, and this was a milestone plane in the history of Aeronautica Militare, because all the pilots becoming later on pilots for both the G91 and introduced into the F104, and they had to make another training over the F104G, and that was based in Grosseto, I think, back in time, the base of the double-seater, of the twin-seater of the one F104. And so this was a model that I made, I think now it's about 3 years ago, and I meant it to be a conversion based on the only 1/48 scale model that you can find around. Basically there is only one box around the G91, the single seater, the G91R, until today. I mean, today we are in fall 2023, and the only model that you can find around about the Gina is the esci, the old esci reissued by Italeri, and with a minor modification into the ocidental box about the single seater. It's a model that is not so bad in the shape. It has some issues in the back, in the tail, in the wings, but many people comment it like a piece of crap, like an old model and so on. Yes, it is an old model because if it's coming from the 80s, but is until today is the only model that you can find around. And in my opinion, you can find an original box from esci. They were molded with a better plastic than Italeri and even more of the Portuguese Ocidental company. The Portuguese had a big love for this plane too, because it was another country together with Greek and Germany using this, and they also used it in a war in Africa, because this was, I think it was in Angola, something like that, where they used the plane like a bomber, and to make like a contrast plane. I think during the 70s. I don't remember honestly the history about that, but I remember that it was just Portuguese nations that used this plane in real combat situations. My model is so based on that is meant to be like a conversion of that single seater, and I had basically to rebuild the entire fuselage. If I did the conversion that I used to sell, it was basically the entire fuselage with a different tail fin, with a different kind of cockpit, because the cockpit was completely different, and the most tricky part was, of course, to create the bulged second canopy used by the G91T, and there was not so big issue to find around the MK4 used by the G91, and also my model was at a kind of particular separation of the molds, because I wanted really to have the fuselage in a single unique pieces. So I molded it in a single part and just left the lower part of the air intake. In the single seater, the air intake for the engine is in a wrong shape, so I had to reshape it completely like I did now, and I had to cut it on the middle line of the air intake to produce a kind of under door, where I also molded the main landing gear inside. Also the main landing gear, the front landing gear, sorry, and also the main landing gear was quite different from the ordinary G91R version. This was typical, that type of front door, and also the opening of the under part of the landing gears was different than the single seater. So it was a little bit tricky to produce it. I think it only existed back in time, I think, from a company that disappeared during the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, making a kind of this idea that I made it now in resin, and I never had the occasion to have it. I could never find it around, so I prefer to build up my own one. And unfortunately, today this conversion is currently out of stock. I made the conversion, and of course I also provided the few logos. For this one was the Reparto Sperimentale Volo. It was the technical departments of the Italian Air Force making experimentation, a kind of VX4 squadron that Americans have, testing the F-14, F-4, and all the modern planes, in different configuration, testing weapon, testing everything. It was very, very interesting because they were part of the Italian Air Force, but they were mostly around the experimentation. I remember that back in time I made one of my wonderful model that was the F104G, and I consider that one of my best model ever that I did it in the past, because this F104G was made when just the Hasegawa model kit arrived on the market, and I was so incredibly happy because it was late 90s and I was able to reach the cover page of Scale Aircraft Modeling International. So for me, an ordinary modeler from Milano, arriving to that point to have the cover page on the Scale Aviation Modeler USA it was. And also there was a very, very nice article that I prepared inside. So, back in time, today my English is not good, but back in time was just words. So imagine what I could try to write it. And I think there was some editor that had to correct what I was going to try to explain, but for me it was one of the best ever. And I remember that also that F104 was finished with the marking of the Reparto Sperimentale Volo. And indeed, I had a calling in my shop when I was owning the Al Soldatino modeling shop in Milano. I had the calling from the pilot of the plane, that was Commander Vettori. Commander Vettori was one of the first Italian astronauts working with NASA to go together on the space shuttle on space. So it was incredibly nice to know this nice history about that model. It's a model that unfortunately today I don't own any longer, because I had to give it to a guy, like a kind of payment. I owned the money, so I gave him this model. But I regret so much, honestly, today, because I really, really liked that model so much more than the money that I should own to this. It was a fucking lawyer, When you have a problem with fucking lawyers, this shit happens, But okay, it's part of the past. I just want to think positive, and my idea is that today I can make even nicer model, because today my hands are better than back in time, better than 20 years ago. And I think I just can make it better using probably maybe a newer kinetic model, a newer kit in plastic. And even about kinetic, talking about the G91, one of the reasons why I didn't made until now, this model was a bestseller when I made it 3 years ago, and now it's completely sold out. My conversion, as I said, was mostly about the fuselage, the cockpit, the canopy, the complete full cockpit with the seat, with the ejection seat, and the main landing gear, and the doors for the different landing gears, including the air intake inside. So it was nearly 50% of the model. I just wanted people to use anyway a plastic model, because the G91 from esci, italeri, or whatever is quite easy to find around. Also, I could find a box. I think my one was the model molded in blue plastic, featuring the Pattuglia Acrobatica Nazionale one, the G91R, used by Frecce Tricolori. Now slightly different in the front end, because they didn't have the front camera, but they had a sharp nose, a sharp end in the end. So, and it was fitting incredibly bad to the fuselage, so I didn't know how they could made that modification so badly, and I didn't like it at all, that version, of course, and they used that like a base to make this kind of modification. But when I made my copies, I think I made about 50 or 60 copies of this plane. It was a bestseller, and to be honest, I had to admit, but the 90% of my production went abroad, so because they all went to Germany, a lot went to Portugal for the reason that I told you before, and a lot went to Greek. Just a minor part went to Italy, because it's funny, because when you make something Italian, there is always somebody that really love it. I have a lot of friends that took a part of this production, of course, because they love everything that I do in 1/48 scale. But I also had a group of people that started to find that there was probably some panel line that was not the proper panel line, because here in Puglia we have this on the square. You know, this is a plane that was based in Puglia, like a training for pilots and so on. So all the population around used to see this plane very, very often flying around. So they are connected so much to the plane that they think that they know the plane so well. I made this fuselage under the blueprint made by Richard Caruana and Angelo Brioschi. Angelo Brioschi is dead now. He's an incredible designer. Was an incredible designer of Italian profiles, you know. And I made a comparison between these two models. You know, the tricky point was that indeed the fuselage of the G91T is a little bit wider also in the middle, so it is not just longer for the double seat and different from the rear hatch of the canopy, you know, but it's also a little larger and a little wider, so it's a little bit different, you know. And you can see that in that position, because as you can see there is a small NACA duct under the connection point between the wing and the fuselage. You see that little triangle, the little triangle there. I don't have three hands to make it bigger, but I think you understand what you mean. Is that black spot exactly behind the yellow stair, you know. And that's because in the ordinary G91R the fuselage goes completely under, so it ends there, and the wing is nearly at the level of the landing gear. Instead, in the G91T, that is a little bit deeper, because all the front part of the fuselage is completely different. So it's similar to the G91R, but it is not at all the same identical plane. You can use, of course, I always say that, I always prefer to start with something that is looking similar, also if partially to that model, and then convert it and making something in my own way, you know, and trying to make this conversion quite cheaper, you know, that usually it is the production in resin, you know. When you produce items in resin, you know, the cost is incredibly high, because there's a lot of material that can be trashed, so it is not like a production of ordinary plastic, you know. And my idea was basically to reissue this model when and if the new upcoming model from, I think it was a Mango or Kinetic, that announced that they wanted to do another model in 1/48 scale about the single seater, the G91R, you know. And of course also I will be the first one loving to buy it and to build it, of course, when it will arrive on the market. But also there is a rumor that say that probably they had a little too much complaints about, many say is Italian modelers. I think all the modelers around the world start to make a complaint about the images, the 3D images that the company shared around, you know, with the idea to say just, hey, we are making the new model of the G91, so you don't have to wait any longer or to apply any longer to make a better modification of the G91R provided by esci, you know, esci from Mr. Coppola. It was the first company that I used to work with when I was a kid, you know. I was a builder for them. I was an ordinary builder for the exhibition and showcases. And the model was also not at all engraved like this one. They had a little, they didn't have the recessed line like this one. It was a little engraved, so that there was just the defined lines over the panels, you know, like they used to do in the 70s and in the 80s. And the model was not at all at the level of something that you can build up today in a decent way, you know. And of course also the different here it was completely different, because the shape of the G91R is different. Here is a little more shorter. It basically ends where there is that black line up there, you know. I think at the end the model have been extremely convincing. This is ended now in my hand. That's why I decided to do the video, because this is the demo plane that I use to take pictures and to show up to all the modelers around the world how can also they finish the model. I mean, if an ordinary modeler like me can finish this in this way, there is great modelers around there, Spanish modeler, Portuguese modeler, German modelers, even more American modelers, of course, that can make it even nicer than what I did. So this is the possibility that I think is possible to do today, you know. So I really hope to see in the future some more of my models built up and shared around Facebook page or Instagram, you know. And so the model ended now in my hands, because I'm currently preparing a box for an exhibition that we will have around Monza in the next few days, you know. And I would like to compete in this competition, not only with my ordinary cars, you know. People that goes around contest used to see me thanks God, still taking prizes, still holding on, in contest is extremely hard, like I used to say today, but I still win something when we go around. And I wanted also to show up this model in the 1/48 scale, because basically I love planes, I make cars, I make trucks, but my real love is about planes. So I remain a soul connected to the stuff that is flying. People that know me know every time that I go to the seaside in the Adriatic Sea in Riccione, I have a lot of friends, a branch of friends that always look at me like a fool because I am with the nose pointing in the sky, looking the F-16 coming from Aviano Air Base. So I love to see that shit in the air. The model is this. I still think that is quite competitive stuff and quite unique stuff, because you don't see so often a G-91T finished and built this way, and I just hope that if somebody is watching this video and got my conversion, I really hope to see your model soon, and let me see what you can do with this item that I produced a couple of years ago. That's it. I love the FIAT G91, and I just hope that really Kinetic, Mang, whatever it was, I think basically it's the same company, will be able to finish the single seater, because I already bought also another plane, another box for the G91R in the original box from esci. It was a wonderful box featuring the cover page from Enzo Maio, incredible, completely mad guy, but incredibly skilled designer that esci had back in time. And of course, I would like to finish in the German color, or also in the Aeronautica Militare color, because the plane is incredibly nice one. The G now remains one of the nicest plane that ever flown over Italy. That's it, and thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one.